Welcome to ASI. My name is Peter Zubero. Today, we'll be diving deep into the USAID dismantling under the Trump's administration. But the question is this a threat to Nigeria, Kenya, and Africans' development? Stay with me as we dig deep into this analysis. The newly re-elected President of the United States, Donald Trump administration, has announced plans to drastically cut or even dismantle the United States Agency for International Development, USAID.
So many of the men and women in this room, as an example, they pay tremendous amounts of taxes. And here are just a few examples of where your money was going before I came along. These are just some of the, just taken at random. Oh, there are much worse examples than this. I was just looking at them before the speech, and I can tell you they were much worse. And $21 million for voter turnout in India. What do we need to spend $21 million for voter turnout in India? Wow, $21 million. I guess they were trying to get somebody else elected. Well, we ought to tell the Indian government, because when we hear that Russia spent about $2 in our country, it was a big deal, right? They took some internet ads for $2,000. This is a total breakthrough. So many of the men and women in this room, as an example, they pay tremendous amounts of taxes. And here are just a few examples of where your money was going before I came along. These are just some of the, just taken at random. Oh, there are much worse examples than this. I was just looking at them before the speech, and I can tell you they were much worse. And there are some that are horrible, but I don't want to really say them because they're very, very embarrassing.
This decision, framed as a push to reduce foreign aid spending and prioritizing American first, is sending shockwaves across Africa. For decades, USAID has been a critical source of funding for healthcare, education, agriculture, and infrastructure across the continent of Africa. But now, with Trump's administration pulling the plugs, what will happen to millions who depend on this program? For countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, Ghana, South Africa, and Uganda, USAID has been a critical force in various sectors' growth. But now, with funding slashed, millions of lives could be at risk. Will this spark an economic and humanitarian disaster? Or could this be the beginning of Africans' journey to true self-reliance? Let's analyze the situation and its impact on key African nations. Why is Trump's administration dismantling the USAID? To understand the crisis, we must first examine why Trump's administration is dismantling the USAID. Firstly, is the American first policy. Trump's priority is domestic investment. His administration argues that American tax dollars should fund the U.S. infrastructure, veterans, and security instead of overseas development. Trump's campaign and presidency have consistently promoted an American first ideology. This means reducing international aid and focusing on domestic issues like immigration, manufacturing, and national security. In Trump's view, billions of U.S. tax dollars spent abroad should instead be reinvested in American infrastructure, veterans, and economic development. Secondly, budget cuts and foreign aid reduction. The Trump's administration has long criticized foreign aid, calling it a waste of money. His 2025 budget slashed billions in aid spending, with USAID taking a massive hit. Many Republican lawmakers support this move, seeing it as a way to reduce government spending. Allegation of corruption and inefficiency. The Trump's administration claims USAID funds are often misused, either by corrupt foreign governments or by inefficient bureaucratic processes. The Trump's administration has long criticized USAID for alleged corruption, inefficiency, and mismanagement of funds. Reports of aid money being lost to bureaucratic overheads or misused by corrupt officials in recipient countries fuel the argument that foreign aid should be significantly reduced or restructured. Thirdly, the rise of China in Africa. With China increasing its economic presence through loans and infrastructure projects, the US sees less reason to maintain foreign aid in Africa. Trump's administration also believes that with China's increasing presence in Africa through infrastructure projects, trade agreements, and investment, US aid is no longer essential. The US may be shifting its focus to strategic competition with China rather than direct aid. And what are the US aid role in Africans' development before the so-called dismantling? Before we discuss the impact of its dismantling, let's examine what USAID has done in Africa. Healthcare. The USAID has provided life-saving assistance in fighting malaria, HIV/AIDS, and Ebola. Programs like the PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, have saved millions of lives. Educationally, building of schools, funding scholarships for millions of African children, especially the girl child, have gained access to education through USAID-funded scholarship, school renovation, and teachers training as some of what the USAID has contributed to the continent of Africa. Agriculture and food security. Initiatives like Feed the Future have helped smallholders farmers increase food production and food security. Infrastructure and economic growth. The USAID has contributed to road construction, energy projects, and clean water initiatives. It has also funded microfinance, entrepreneurship, and infrastructure projects. Democracy and governance, supporting free election, anti-corruption efforts, and human rights initiatives are some of the contribution the USAID has done to the continent of Africa. How about the loss of this program? The loss of this program will have severe consequences, especially in heavily aid-dependent nations like Nigeria, Kenya, and Ethiopia. The impact on Nigeria. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, but USAID has played a crucial role in health, security, and economic development. In healthcare crisis, HIV treatment will suffer because Nigeria is one of the largest recipients of the PEPFAR funding. With USAID cuts, access to antiretroviral drugs for millions could be disrupted. Malaria and maternal health programs. USAID has been a key player in fighting malaria and supporting maternal health services in rural Nigeria. Without the support, child mortality could rise. How about the Nigerian economic setback? USAID has supported small businesses and agriculture in Nigeria, particularly through microfinance program. Funding cuts may increase unemployment and poverty. The loss of investment in education will affect millions of school children, particularly in the north, where USAID has helped combat low literacy rate. Security and counter-terrorism impact. The USAID has supported efforts to stabilize the north against Boko Haram, banditry, and a whole lot of insurgents by funding education and economic opportunities for young people. If funding disappears, there is a risk that youth unemployment will increase, fueling extremism. Let's talk about the impact of the USAID dismantling in Kenya. Kenya has been one of the largest recipients of USAID support in East Africa. The country relies heavily on aid for health, education, and agriculture. Healthcare collapse, HIV and malaria program, just like the same in Nigerian's case. Kenya received millions in PEPFAR funding to support antiretroviral drugs and malaria prevention programs. Maternal and child health. USAID supports rural clinics that provide vaccination, prenatal care, and nutrition programs. Without aid, infant mortality rates could rise. Agriculture and economic decline. Kenya is a leading agricultural nation, and USAID has helped farmers access better seed, irrigation, and market. The loss of funding will reduce food security, affecting millions of Kenyans. Talking about education and governance risk. Many school programs in marginalized community relies on USAID funding. Without it, Kenya could see increased dropout rate. USAID also supports democracy and governance initiative, including election monitoring. This raises concern about political instability ahead of Kenya's next election. The impact of other African countries like Ethiopia, has one of the largest USAID-funded humanitarian relief programs, especially in famine and conflict-affected areas. The loss of funding could worsen food insecurity and impact the country's fragile political stability. How about in Ghana? Ghana has relied on USAID for education and health programs, particularly in rural areas. This cut could reverse progress made in reducing child mortality. In South Africa received millions in PEPFAR funding for HIV/AIDS treatment. Losing this funding could lead to treatment shortages and resurgence of the HIV disease and many more. In Uganda, USAID has been a major funder of agriculture and small businesses. The withdrawal of funds could lead to job losses and economic downfall. What are the immediate consequences of USAID dismantling in Africa? With Trump's administration slashing USAID funding, Africa is facing several immediate threats. Number one, the healthcare catastrophe. HIV/AIDS treatment in jeopardy. The PEPFAR program has been a lifeline for millions of HIV patients without USAID funding. Access to life-saving antiretroviral drugs could be severely limited. Disease outbreak risk. USAID was instrumental in combating Ebola and malaria. Without its support, disease surveillance and response mechanism will weaken. Maternal and child care impact. The USAID has provided prenatal care and vaccination for newborns. A funding cut will increase child mortality rate in many African countries. The economic setback and job losses. Many NGOs and organizations that rely on USAID grant will shut down, leading to massive job losses in the development sector. Agricultural programs that help small-scale farmers access modern tools and technology will disappear, reducing food production and increasing hunger. USAID-funded microfinance and entrepreneurship programs that help African startups and small businesses grow will vanish. Political instability and security concerns. Countries that rely on USAID for governance programs and election monitoring could see increased corruption and weakening democratic institutions. Extremist groups like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab thrive in areas of economic hardship. Without USAID stabilization programs, these groups may expand their influence. What are the long-term implications and the future of Africa without USAID? While USAID dismantling threatens Africa in the short term, what about the long run? Will China replace USAID? China has invested billions in Africa, but unlike USAID, China gives loans, not grants. This could lead to debt dependency. With the US stepping back, China may increase its presence through loans, infrastructure investment, and trade deals. However, unlike USAID grant, China involvement often comes with debt obligation that could lead to financial dependency. Will African leaders turn to China for alternative funding? A push for self-resilience. Some argue this is a chance for African governments to invest more in their own development instead of relying on foreign donors. AfCFTA, African Continental Free Trade Areas, could help strengthen economic dependency by promoting trade among African nations, encouraging private sector-led growth instead of relying on foreign donors. New donors and private sector solution, exploring partnership with alternative donors like the UK, the EU, Gulf of Nations, and India may step in to fill the gaps. The private sector and African billionaires could take on a bigger role in the development of the continent. Political and diplomatic shift. African nations may need to reconsider their diplomatic strategies, balancing relationship with global powers like China, the EU, and Russia. The absence of US aid may lead to decreased American influence in the African political affair. But now, the question is this a crisis or a wake-up call? The dismantling of US aid under the Trump's administration marks a turning point for Africa. While it threatens vital aid dependency program, it could also be a wake-up call for African nations to become self-reliant and reduce dependency on foreign donors. So what do you think? Should Africa fight to keep US aid, or should it embrace this as an opportunity to break free from foreign aid? Is this a disaster for Africa, or an opportunity to build a new self-reliant future? We want to hear your thoughts. Should Africa fight to keep the US aid funding, or should it embrace this moment to break free from foreign aid? Leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of Africans' development, only on ASI. My name is Peter Zubero. Bye for now.
This is Africa Social Intellect, your premier destination for thought-provoking discussions and insightful perspectives on the vibrant and diverse African community and beyond. Our dedication extends beyond conversations. In recognizing the importance of security, we provide essential information to help safeguard vulnerable nations. From navigating local challenges to assisting these vulnerable nations against imperialistic threats, we stand as a beacon of awareness and resilience. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share our news. If you're watching on Facebook or another platform, follow us and share this reliable news source. We hope you enjoy the news, and thank you for watching, and see you next time.